This is the Wally and Methot Show. Now, here are your hosts, Brent Wallace and Mark Methot.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Brent Wallace. He's Mark Methot, who's also trying to earn a roster spot with the Ottawa Senators defense these days. Yeah, I think you could play right now.
I'm not. I probably could play for a game and blend in pretty well, despite my knee. But if you're expecting me to skate the next day or even a week after that, I might have to bail. So
I will give you the option.
I'm a good emergency D-man to have because I have kept up with my fitness and all that stuff. So, but it wouldn't be very pretty.
I will send a text to Pierre Dorian. He won't answer it, but I'll send a text. All right. The Sens are in Montreal tonight for a preseason matchup number 6 on the season. There's concerns right now, and I know there's no Brady Tkachuk, and we'll briefly talk about that in a second, but there is concerns about their offense and their lack of scoring right now. They've got 12 goals in 5 games. 7 of those came in one game against Montreal, and another 3 came in another game. So 10 goals in 2 games. That leaves them with 2 goals in 3 games for all the math out there. So yesterday, you've got DJ Smith talking about Tim Stützle needs to get dangerous in the offensive zone. They're moving him up to play with Norris and Batherson to see if they can generate some offense that way. Is there a reason in the preseason, and we're talking preseason here, like we're playoff practice, I guess, is there a reason to be concerned?
Well, I mean, and I think we're in a position now where people are, it's been said the rebuild is over and it's time to move forward and people are going to expect another step forward. I think from a fan's perspective, and I'm including myself in that category, I think you need to understand that there's still going to be a lot of growing pains here. I mean, this isn't a deep team, right? Okay. So you lose Colin White. There's an injury right there. There's been a few. And obviously with Brady not in the lineup right now, the makeup and the structure of some of these lines are off a little bit. And so, that chemistry that these lines will form together, that takes time and reps. And then you factor in, the idea that this is a young group. They're not very deep. Obviously, when you look at the depth here on those 3rd, 4th lines, and perhaps even on their 3rd D pairing, you're not going to get a ton of production there, at least not yet. So I don't know that that's a huge concern. I mean, I know that as an organization's point of view, you want to take a step forward. You want to be progressing in that direction, but you're still going to get ups and downs. And right now there's a little adversity that this team is facing, right? And until Brady signs and fills in that left side there up front, and then you can structure down, or you get the trickle down effect from all those other good players that are going to be playing where they should be, you're going to have some growing pains, and that's inevitable. So at this point, Stützle is going to be up there. Hopefully you can get him confident. Hopefully he can avoid a bit of a sophomore jinx, but you just don't know, right? It's so early, and I don't think this team should be putting that much pressure on its players just yet. They're not in a win now mode right now this season. It's okay to lose a couple games.
Okay, so if you are playing on the Ottawa Senators right now and you can see the struggles offensively, is there any concern, or are you supposed to get concerned 5 games into the season? And my point is, do we get too bent out of shape right now when we're talking about preseason?
Yeah, and we're all hungry for hockey, right? We're all hungry to jump to the conclusion of analyzing what we're seeing out there, and we forget where this team is actually placed last year, and that they're a bottom tier team, and I think they're looking to make that step forward. But again, like I said, and I hate repeating myself, but we have to be patient with this group. It's not going to happen overnight. I know there's a lot of excitement, but it's still at the end of the day a very young group. And if you look at the realignment this season, Wally, with the structure, they're being back at the Atlantic. Look at the teams they're going to be playing against. This is not going to be a cakewalk, right? So again, I think it comes down to being healthy, and a team like this can't afford a lot of injuries. They quite simply cannot afford it. So they're going to look for some scoring. They've got Stützle moved up with Norris and Batherson right now. How long does that experiment last for? We don't know, but I'm curious to see how these last exhibition games play out.
And that's one of the things, right? Like, you're not looking to necessarily see wins and losses on a score sheet. What you're looking for is individual play. You've seen Jake Batherson play. He looks like he's fine, ready to go. Josh Norris, Shane Pinto. We look at Chris Tierney. We think he's okay as a serviceable spot in that center rotation. I guess the issue is Tim Stützle. When everybody's got the focus on the big stars, he's the one guy that's generated the most negative attention, if you will, the way he's played. Should there be concern with Tim Stützle's play as he goes into his 2nd full season?
It depends what your expectation level is. If you're expecting him to come out and produce right now and throw out some bold prediction like I did last week with regards to the amount of goals I thought he would get, then maybe there are some legitimate reasons for concerns, right? But he's so young. And we're talking about a really young hockey player here that's just made a big step into the NHL. And so the sophomore jinx is a funny thing because I think it's a lot of it is a mindset, right? You come into the league, you're running on adrenaline, you're exceeding everybody's expectation levels in that first year, depending on how you play, of course. And then you come back and you think it's probably just going to come back to you, with maybe that same amount of effort, or it'll come back easier, but that's not the case, right? People kind of get attuned to your game and they know who you are now. Like the secret's out there. They know that Tim Stützle is a dangerous player. He's offensively very gifted. He's got a very good shot. And all of a sudden, there's a little bit more focus on you as a player when it comes to the opponents playing against you in their game plan leading up to that game. So, there are a lot of factors and variables that affect your play going into that second season. And that's where the coaching staff and the leadership has to help him as much as they can and insulate him with some pretty good players so that when he does have an off night, he's still supported. Guys are still dragging him into the battle. So again, having said all that, I'm not even remotely concerned with Tim Stützle. He's going to be a fantastic elite player at the NHL level. It's just a matter of time.
Yep, fair enough. Brings us to the second line, and that's so they've taken Stützle off the Shane Pinto, Connor Brown, and they put Nick Paul there. DJ Smith saying it's an identity line. We think it can play with anybody in the league. It's defensively responsible, all that stuff. All right. So are you okay with this line? Like Nick Paul is going, it feels like he's just getting moved around and he's everybody's best friend, right? He just stick him there. He can't play 60 minutes a night. So where is Nick Paul going to end up here?
Well, and it's funny because, I think, Wally, you and I can safely say this. We've been pumping this guy's tires all last season, and we've been doing it all summer, and rightfully so. He's a fantastic player, and he's really turned into a very serviceable utility guy on pretty. I'd be bold to saying on any team, really. He can play any kind of way you'd like, but it's interesting, right? Because I guess they had to shift around Formanton a little bit, and that experiment's kind of fizzling again, and they got him back on that third line. But that's subject to change after the next game, right? We don't know. But do I like Nick Paul there with Pinto and Brown? Sure. I don't see any issue with it. I think he's reliable. You can put him anywhere you like. I feel bad for him because I know as a player, you want to develop instant chemistry with a line, right? Or in my case, when I played with a defense partner, and that takes time. And so you got to learn each other's tendencies, where everyone's going to be on the ice at all times. And that can take, 10, 20 games. So, I know Paulie's got a lot of experience with a lot of these players from last year as well. But again, this all comes down to Brady, right? At the end of the day, when he slots back into that lineup, everybody slides down back into their position, and all is well again in Sens land. So, again, I'm not going to put too much stock into any of this stuff. I know it's fun to talk about it, and we're doing that right now, but none of it really matters because opening night, all these lines are going to look different, assuming Brady's playing. It comes down
I don't think he's playing opening night, which leads us to all is not well in Sens land. And so here's the thing. So why do fans need to take sides? Because right now it seems like either you have to be on Camp Brady or you've got to be Camp Sens. And I don't care, because the part of the negotiation is both sides have to give up something. So until then, it's just a negotiation. I understand it's going late. I understand you want him in the lineup. Everybody does. But that's not the reality at the moment. So why do you have to pick sides?
Isn't it funny though, eh? Like before camp starts, all the pressure, at least, and I'm basing this opinion that I'm coming up with here. This is based off of Twitter and social media. So I don't know how representative it is entirely of the entire group of fans, but basically before camp, everybody was on Brady's side, right? And then slowly as camp kind of goes on, people start to lose a little patience, and they start, and not a lot, but there are a small vocal few that are now kind of, turning their opinion towards Brady and that he's selfish. And again, I still think it's pretty divided. And at the end of the day, I think it's just a fan base that gets frustrated, right? Everyone's hungry to see Brady play. They love the player, and he's a fantastic personality to have in the group. So, I think you can see it though, right, Wally? The fan opinion is starting to shift a little bit, and I think people are starting to get very frustrated, but rightfully so. I think nobody ever wants to see a stalemate between an organization and one of their star players. Never mind the fact that you're not really going to get any sympathy from a fan base when it comes to dollar signs. And the same applied to the CBA, right? When we were in a lockout, People get frustrated and then they start voicing your opinion. So if you were to voice an opinion as a player online, you got no sympathy. People were like, screw you. You're some millionaire. Why are like, we can't relate to that. It's not fair. So I understand how the narrative has changed now over the last few weeks. I saw it coming, and that puts a little bit of pressure on the player. And I said this earlier on, Wally, as a player, if you're holding out, I mean, I've never done it myself, but I can only imagine what it's like to watch your line mates and your team battle night in and night out, if you will, in exhibition games. And you're sitting back at home thinking, boy, like I need to be there right now. Like I miss that. So I feel like the pressure will start to build a little bit on a player like Brady. I know he's got a lot of good veteran voices in his camp, but come on, like this is human nature. Your teammates, the guys that you go to battle with are out there playing and you're not there. It gets frustrating. So I can only imagine what he's feeling. And I'm hopeful that both sides can figure this out soon.
Two things that bother me about this. One, fans saying, well, I would play for 8 million. Stop being so greedy. Listen, I don't begrudge Brady Tkachuk getting 8, 9, 10. I don't care if it's 100 million. You get what the market will pay you. And that's right. Listen, it doesn't matter if you're the, Johnny down the street who's an accountant and you're not making 8 million because you're not playing hockey. Like, can we just pump the brakes on, stop being so greedy. I'll never see that in my lifetime. You should just be happy to accept it. That's not how it doesn't work that way. Pro sports works. The other one is stop taking it so personal. This has nothing to do with you as a fan. I get that you want your team to succeed, but they're not coming after you. This is not about you. Just sit back, wait for them to show up. It's going to happen at some point, and let's move on. But I don't understand the vitriol on both sides. Well, I get it. I get it in negotiations with players leaving because of that, but I just don't understand until this gets resolved of all the vitriol.
Yeah. And again, I don't like sounding like a pessimist by any means, but I mean, this is not a Stanley Cup team right now. So if this was a team that was making a legitimate push and your captain is holding out, I can understand, maybe feeling a little more pressure and being a little more angry, but I think patience is okay right now. This team is still trying to find itself. Yes, we kind of know what their identity is, but they're not making a Stanley Cup push this year. I think they're going to try to progress, as I said earlier, but I mean, I'm still hopeful. I'm going to stop blabbing on here and making excuses for Brady. I think at the end of the day, we still have to give it time. They still have time now. And we talked about this a little bit with Mike Johnson. Like, he's going to be behind the 8 ball now for a little bit, assuming he does sign this week. His conditioning, all that stuff, you cannot replicate that anywhere other than at the NHL level with an NHL hockey club. So if and when he does happen to sign here over the next week, I don't know if you're going to get that same player for those first 10 games, at least. Like, it's going to take him a little bit of time to get his feet wet and get his conditioning back up to par. So again, I think as a fan base, as analysts, we just have to be patient. It's going to happen, hopefully, here at some point. I thought Ian had a really nice piece there in The Athletic about this, and he was comparing the bridge deal versus long-term. I don't think it's all doom and gloom if he does sign a bridge deal. I loved how Ian Mendez put that together in that piece. He made some really good points. No need to panic. It's going to be okay. Brady's camp knows the fan base loves him. I'm assuming he loves playing in Ottawa. Let's just all relax, sort of.
But the funny part, well, I guess the part about him not being ready to play and needing that extra time, he's not the most fleet of foot. So he's going to need all the time he can to get back in the lab.
But you can make the argument, Wally, that that's not really a factor because he's not the best skater in the world, right? So you can make an argument that he can just go out there, get his nose dirty, be a shit disturber, go to net front and whack in some goals initially, at least before everything else catches up. So it's going to be very intriguing. I'm not sure. I'm with you though. Like, if it was me, my conditioning would be off. Being a defenseman, having to skate backwards and all that stuff, it would affect me big time. But timing. Exactly. The timing's a big one too, right? Getting those reps in with your line mates, you cannot replicate that with some junior players back, south of the border.
As we say, interesting to see how this plays out. I don't think he's there on opening night, which is a week away. Do you?
Oh, come on. No, don't do that to the people. Don't want to hear that, Wally. Be positive. I think Brady's going to sign this weekend. I think it's going to get done, and you're going to see him in camp, or rather in Ottawa, a couple days before that first game.
So if he signs then on the weekend, and happy Thanksgiving to Ottawa, is he in the lineup opening night with just a couple of days to get ready? I don't think you can.
Yes, Wally. Guaranteed he's in the lineup.
There's the blown. Then he blows his groin and we're done, and he's out for months.
Yeah, well, okay, that's a tad dramatic, but I mean, that could happen to anybody. By the way, I don't know if you're going to segue into that, but we saw a couple big injuries here over the last few nights.
I didn't, but look at you being the segue guy. Okay, so I'll just bring it up. I wanted to talk about the Sens D, but we can get back to that in a sec. Speaking of defensemen, PK Subban the other night gets tangled up with Ryan Reaves, I'll call it.
Tangled.
There are, obviously, if you're a Ranger fan, it's a deliberate attempt to injure. It's a slew foot. If you are PK Subban and the New Jersey Devils, I just was trying to play the puck. I just got my foot up. It's a kicking motion to the back of Ryan Reaves' ankle. You're a defenseman. You've played that position for 600 games. Is that an attempt to injure, or was he just trying to stop the puck?
Two things can be true. I don't believe PK Subban had any intent on injuring Reaves. I don't think there was any intent to injure him there. He's not known as a dirty player. We can put that to bed. But I still think it was a very reckless play, although very subtle. That left leg of PK's that kind of kicks out a little bit. I forget now if it was his left or his right, but he kind of nudges. Yeah, it kind of nudges Reaves in the back of the skate. As a defenseman, there's no need to be doing that. Like I've never had an instinct to kick my leg out to push a player one way or another. And it's incredibly dangerous. That's why we take slew footing so seriously at the NHL level, because not only can you smack the back of your head on the ice, we saw it with Reaves, with his ankle, his knee. I mean, a lot of different things can go wrong. So I think in the end, I do think that there was zero intent to injure the player, but it was very reckless. It was very subtle. And I know PK was apologetic afterwards in that little presser that they had, but I don't like the play myself. And I think selfishly as a fan, I was looking forward to seeing Reaves and the Tom Wilson kind of drama, maybe a couple fights too. That would have been really cool. A couple big heavyweight fights, but beyond all that, I don't know what they're going to do. Like, Wally, does the league give him a call here, or is this just going to be kind of swept under the rug?
They might give him a call. Like, that's an interesting play because, there was a slew foot the other night in the Ottawa-Montreal game, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's the Ottawa-Montreal game in Ottawa. There is one that's right behind the net, and it doesn't get called. I think it's Gallagher, but anyway,
I was at a wedding. Yeah. So I'm like drawing a huge blank right now.
It's okay. But the slew foot to me is that's one of the most dangerous things I think you can do in hockey.
Yeah,
and especially now Ryan Reaves is falling. And so one of the discussions is he was going to get hurt anyway, because he was already off balance. Now, whether he's going to get hurt, I'm not sure, but looked like he was awkward going down he was going to fall anyway. So
yeah, I don't know.
I just don't like the play. I think it's a dirty play.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm agreeing with you. Now, again, the only thing that I'll add, as I said earlier, twice, I don't know that was intentional. Like, as far as the intent to injure, obviously, like, I don't think it was a malicious play. I think it was just a reckless, kind of lazy play on PK Subban's part, and shit happens. It's as simple as that. And I don't want to overanalyze it. I think that it is what it is.
Okay, so my last point is then you call it reckless and not an attempt to injure. But if you are doing a somewhat kicking motion or lifting your foot up going into the corner, it is.
I still think it's a game. I think it's at least a game suspension. I do, because you have to get that out. Like, and not that it's this rampant issue around the NHL where there's these slew foots. That's not what I'm saying. But you have to hold players accountable for their actions on the ice, and whether you intended to do that or not, it happened. It's not a normal hockey play. So I guess, at the end of the day, it's probably a suspension. As much as I hate saying that, I mean, you have to call it as it is.
My only point is you guys play at the highest level. You are the highest trained athletes. You are the best that you do in your position. So my point is that you have control over this. Some people are like, well, if you play at a high speed, you don't necessarily have control. No, I'm going to guess you are a defenseman. You would tell me that you have control.
You have control. You're not even playing the puck. So what else are you doing? You're shadowing a guy. You're watching him going into the wall. And it could be a bit of a foot race, but Reaves had a step on him. He was ahead of him. When a player is going into your corner as a defenseman, you don't even think about nudging him or doing any of that, because there's so much that could go wrong, right? Imagine a boarding penalty from 10 feet out and the guy goes in head first because you give him a little casual nudge on the back. Like, you just don't do that as a defenseman, right? So the same applies with your feet. And like, it's just, to me, all I'd be doing in that position is staying behind him and maybe having a hand close to his back and making sure that I'm not going to let him separate myself between him and giving him a step to the net. So again, it's just body positioning. You just have to just stand there and let him do what he's got to do, and then you pin him. So again, it's easy to say that from behind my computer screen, and I am acknowledging that. But anytime you see a little foot kind of stick out, you think, ooh, like I don't like that play. So whatever. Yeah.
Anyway, I'll move on. He does, if you watch it again, PK does let Reaves go. Like he pauses until Reaves starts to move towards, and then he follows him in because he doesn't, as you say, doesn't want him to cut back to the net.
And that's again, that's where I don't believe it was intended to hurt the guy. I think it was just a weird kind of reactionary move that PK had, and it resulted in a bad injury. It's unfortunate, but you have to pay the piper anytime a player is out for that long off a reckless play, whether you intended to hurt him or not.
Just a reminder, brought to you by Bonisher Excavating Inc., BEI, BonisherExcavating.com, helping to shape the Ottawa Valley. Go see them for equipment rentals and all kinds of aggregate and all kinds of your needs in the Ottawa Valley. BonisherExcavating.com. Finally, one of your favorite topics. Well, that's your only favorite topic, and that is talking about the Ottawa Senator blue line.
Correct.
So it looks now like Victor Mete may be moving up the depth chart here and is going to be paired with Zaitsev tonight. So either you're happy with Mete or you're unhappy with Michael Del Zotto.
Well, so were you and I not promoting Mete quite a bit all through camp, all at the start? I was saying this. He can move the puck, and unlike Brandstrom, which I'm still a fan of, by the way, but he's a pretty good defender as well. Like I thought Mete ended very well last year with his one-on-one battles. I thought he was pretty good all around, and he's very confident. So am I surprised now that he's paired with Zaitsev? No, not at all. Because I think if you're watching this and you put politics aside, you're not going to have Del Zotto up there on that second pairing. I don't think he's earned that spot right now. And I hate criticizing guys, especially players that I used to play against quite a bit. But it's just, that's the truth. And if I'm going to be honest with myself in my assessment, I don't know that he's earned that spot. So right now, I don't even know if I'd put him in the lineup. I feel like Brandstrom's been pretty consistent. Now he's also been pretty consistent in making errors in his own zone, but that's another topic. But if you can get Brandstrom to clean up some of his D-zone blunders, because he's been very good offensively, he's very good at moving the puck. Can't take that away from him. And maybe you play him with a player like Holden, which, by the way, another guy that I liked. As soon as they picked up Holden and Del Zotto, Holden was my guy. Like, I played with him before. He's smart. He's big. He moves pretty well. I'm not remotely surprised to see him having a pretty solid training camp. So, you know, you have a guy like Mete with Zaitsev. To me, that's a good pairing. I mean, maybe not a good pairing, but it's as good as you'll get right now for that second pairing. And not only that, at least Mete can move the puck pretty well. I don't know that Zaitsev's a great puck mover, but he works his bag off. He's got great work ethic. So does that leave Del Zotto as your odd man out with Josh Brown? I guess so. But even then, I like Josh Brown as a seventh guy, because you need a player like that occasionally, right? A guy that you can slot into a lineup when you know it's going to be a physical game, or if you know you're going to be killing some penalties on a back-to-back and you need a little bit of energy. That's a good guy to have as your seven. So right now, obviously Shabbat and Zub, Wally, those are your top two. There's no question. You can't separate them. You need a legitimate top pairing on your team. You can't be shuffling guys around to balance it out. So that's good. Mete and Zaitsev, I guess for now, you see how that goes over the next few games as well. Hopefully they develop a little bit of chemistry together. And then Brandstrom and Holden as an experiment, I guess. I mean, Holden's a great guy to have as a partner. I don't know that you're going to find a better one for Brandstrom in that entire lineup other than Zub. So it checks out. I like the way it's formed up, and I'm not surprised to see it over the course of the last 2 weeks come to this point. This is sort of what we assumed would happen. And, they'll start off this way. And if at any point Brandstrom struggles, I feel like that's your opportunity to have Del Zotto slot back into the lineup. Interesting.
So along with Nick Paul, Thomas Shabbat and Artem Zub all playing 60 minutes now for the rest of the season.
I know. I hear you. But that's your depth, right? And that's where, when you look across the NHL and you look at all these lineups, you kind of get lost into the bubble that they were in last year in the North, right? But when you look at these lineups, I think you're going to see some of these guys get exposed a little bit more this year. And that's unfortunate. And that's not an indictment of the Ottawa Senators. This is all part of the process. And you're not going to go out looking for another top four right now, because you're not making a run for it. So you have to be patient. You have to understand that some of these players are going to get hemmed in their own zone for a long periods of time. Some games are going to get very ugly. Other games are going to go pretty well when they're energetic and they're running around well and they're moving the puck well. But again, this is not a Stanley Cup team by any means, but they're on the right track. And I know with some of the, the young guys that are going to be coming in over the next couple seasons, the Sandersons, the JBDs, are going to be okay.
Finally, on the Senator topic, and I skipped over it earlier, Colin White, they're expected to make an announcement on his injury later today. Here's what you tell me what you think is going to happen down the middle of the ice on opening night. That's all I want. Just give me your 4 guys who are going to play opening night.
Well, who do we have? So we have Norris, Pinto, Tierney, and Agazino right now, technically. Yeah.
Technically.
And then, I was looking at this morning, Wally, and I'm thinking, I'm trying to play out different scenarios. I know Nick Paul's that kind of wild card, that you could move. But even then, so if you move Nick Paul, who do you have on your second line there on that left wing if Brady's not in the lineup, right? I don't know. So for now, Norris, Pinto, Tierney, Agazino, that's probably your safe bet.
Okay.
And I don't know. And then you have on that fourth line, obviously we have Sanford and Ennis playing on the wings, but I don't really like that fourth line, to be honest with you. But I guess as a coach, you don't really have to play them a ton. And I think, again, and I keep saying this, I sound like a bloody broken record. This all comes down to Brady Tkachuk, right? When Brady decides that he likes the deal on the table and he comes back into this lineup, it'll put the lines back at ease a little. But right now, I think when we're talking about center with Colin White's unfortunate injury, and by the way, I feel for Whitey, it's awful. And this was his bounce back year. Not that it's over for him by any means, but to be out for that long is going to hurt him a little bit. And that's not cool. But I guess back to the point here, Norris, Pinto, Tierney, Agazino, I don't see how you shuffle anything else around. I'm sure there are options. I don't know what they are at the moment.
Here's what I think is going to happen. And just quickly on Colin White, remember last year, he was a healthy scratch going in to start the season. So it looked like things were going to obviously turn around for him. He was going to have a spot probably at third line. Now it's obviously weeks to longer away. I think Pierre Dorion is going to go to the waiver wire to pick up a center.
Well, that was, and I've read some stuff with regards to that online. I'm just not going to bank on it, but Wally, I agree. If there's ever a time, now's the time. You got to fill that void with White out now, especially you're very thin up front. That is a thin lineup.
As they get down to rosters having to be trimmed right to 23 and under and guys going through waivers, there's all kinds of players right now that are going to be put on waivers.
But how many times does a waiver player ever turn out to be a real effective guy on your team? Almost never.
Victor Mete is in your lineup.
I'm talking out of training camp here, but I know what you mean.
Tyler Ennis was on waivers at one point, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I don't know. But
I understand what you're saying. It's very rare that guys get picked up and moved. I understand that. But when you have a necessity like they do now, there should be somebody available that will be serviceable as a fourth line center for them.
Well, and they need to
add some money.
Well, that's another big one, right? Is you got to reach the cap floor. So it'll be interesting. I don't know who they're going to go after. I'm curious to see who ends up on waivers on some of these other top teams, but man, oh man, they need something right now, especially up front. There's an argument to be made on the back end as well, but I'm not as panicky back there. They've got good depth at the very least, right? With players like Brown and Del Zotto. So, they should be okay, but I agree, Wally. Going after a forward right now seems like a pretty important detail.
All right. By the way, just a reminder, the Ontario Clothing Company is still running a promo. You got a couple days left to get in. Use the coupon code, all caps, Wham Show, and that will help you get 15% off the entire order. Go to Ontario Clothing Company, check them out. Really great stuff. And finally, coming up, we have Jacques Martin. He's the winningest coach all time in Senators history, but he's a really good person and now working over at TVA doing analysis. He's been a head coach with 4 teams. Great stuff. And we get to go back and have some chats about Jacques Martin. Before, Meth, you have an old coach, and I will say outside of junior to the NHL, where a minor league coach that really became one of the instrumental influences in your hockey career.
Oh, so we're not allowed to consider. So junior's out of the question.
Can't say Dale Hunter. It's too easy.
Because Dale Hunter would have been my pick for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So what is it about Dale Hunter that makes him so good?
Well, it was such a pro style environment that we were playing in, because Dale has so much in it. Obviously, because Dale, and not just Dale, but Mark Hunter as well. Between the two brothers, there's so much NHL experience that they've created an NHL factory in London, Ontario. And that was the case. I mean, we had I want to say we had about 8 or 9 draft picks. When I won the Memorial Cup there, we had about 8 or 9 NHL draft picks on that team at the very least. And it was just that kind of environment that you could learn off of. And it really prepared me for, the American League when I made that jump. But I mean, if for argument's sake, I'm trying to think of coaches that I can truly look back on and lean on. And I think Dale's probably one of them for sure. And then, Ken Hitchcock was my first NHL coach when I was called up. So maybe Hitch is part of that equation as well. So, but I mean, a lot of this stuff, I mean, once you get to the pro level is on your own. You're not really mentored by a coach unless you're an 18-year-old getting into the NHL and a coach takes you under under his wing type of deal. That's different. Yeah. But when you're coming into the NHL at 22, 23, 24, you've kind of have to figure it out on your own. Right. And more importantly, you're looking at veterans, captains, the guys that have been around. Like when I was in the American League, we had a captain, his name was Jamie Pusher. He won an NHL, he won a Stanley Cup at the NHL level under Ken Hitchcock in Dallas, like a seasoned veteran. Guys like that are the people that are your biggest influences. And in my opinion, far greater than coaches, really. And I mean that with all due respect to all the coaches. I know I had Scott O'Neill was probably one of the best coaches I had because in Columbus, when I was starting to really break out into the NHL and become an established player, he gave me an opportunity to play a lot as a head coach when he was in Columbus. But your most influential figureheads at the NHL level are always going to be the players and your leadership.
Interesting. Last question on that. London. What was the difference when you played in the National Hockey League for the Columbus Blue Jackets that was different from London, aside from the plane, obviously, in the hotel?
Yeah, the travel,
right?
Oh,
but
man.
like when you walked into the NHL rink or whatever, were you? This is pretty much the same.
It was. You know what the difference was? I wasn't playing with 18-year-olds anymore. It was like all of a sudden you're playing with guys who have kids, like you're playing with full-grown dads, right? Yeah. And especially at that time when I came into the league, it was a little older than it is now. So you get in there and everyone's got kids, some kids in school, like, Adam Foote was our captain. And like, he had 3 boys at this point, this mansion, and everything was just, it was a real eye-opening experience, right? Because it was just a culture shock for me as a young player living in my billet's basement, now making the step to the NHL or the American League. And, responsibilities have changed. Now I'm not living with the billet family anymore. I got to pay my own bills. And I'm calling my agent asking why half my paycheck is gone. Well, Mark, it's taxes. Welcome to the real world. So those are all things that change as a player when you make that jump. And, it's a crash course learning experience for sure.
Interesting you say that about coaches and teaching, because Jacques Martin, our guest coming up, was always known to be a great teacher. Because at the time, right, he took over a fledgling Ottawa Senator team and turned them into a powerhouse. And he taught a lot of those because they were all young, up-and-coming guys, much like we're seeing right now with this group of Ottawa Senators. That is coming up after the break. It is brought to you by Whitewater Beer. Of course, Whitewater Beer quenches all our interviews. Shop whitewater.ca, use 15% off use the Wally and Methot coupon, get 15% off. And don't forget the Killaloo Sunrise. That's right, the beaver tail inspired quenching beer that you can use for this Thanksgiving. We'll be right back after the break. You're watching the Wally and Methot Show. Here's the pre-scout on Jacques Martin, built by BEI, Bonnechere Excavating Inc., helping to shape the Ottawa Valley. Visit BonnechereExcavating.com for equipment rentals, aggregate, and so much more. Okay, he's the head coach of 4 NHL teams. Started in St. Louis, spent 9 years with Ottawa. He went to Florida and ended with Montreal. 341 wins is the most by any Senators head coach. Won the 1999 Jack Adams Award for Coach of the Year. 3 other times a finalist. And he's a 2-time Stanley Cup champion with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He also helped Canada win Olympic gold, World Cup of Hockey, and World Championship. I could go on and on, but you get the picture that Jacques Martin is a very, very highly decorated coach. And of course, he just turned 69 years old. Pearls of Wisdom, brought to you by sportsinteraction.com, Canada's odds makers. Go to sportsinteraction.com/Wally Methot today to get on. Great betting, user-friendly design as well. All right. 8 straight playoff appearances with Ottawa from 1997 to 2004. He won 3 Northeast Division titles with Ottawa, including the President's Trophy in the 02-03 season. And he is 16th all-time in games coached at 1,294, 21st all-time in wins. And this is the best part. 613 career wins as an NHL head coach, which coincidentally is the area code for Ottawa. Jacques Martin, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be on, guys.
It's so good to see you. I guess, what have you been up to?
Well, this year is a little different. As you know, most of the falls in the past years I've been kind of dedicated and involved with training camps. So it's a busy time of the season. So for me this year, it's a good thing I'm used to training camp. So right now, because I've had knee surgery, I'm on the schedule twice a day, rehabbing in the morning, rehabbing in the afternoon. So it kind of fits the mold of a training camp schedule.
Is it tough for you not to be on the ice or around the rink right now?
It is. I think, the one thing with hockey, I think that you develop over the years is the relationships with the staff, with people you work with, but also the relationships with players. And the fact that, I've been around the league for 35 years, you get to work with young players. So it kind of keeps you young. And I've always appreciated having to deal with the players. I think I always felt that one of the job of a coach is to try to make the player the best possible that he can be. Understand that he has some great assets, get him to play within his strength, and also to work on areas that he needs to improve. But I think as a coach, over my career, I've been able to fairly be objective about a player that, certain, we all have deficiencies, and same thing with players. And I think the key is if you can accept those deficiencies and try to get him to work within his strength, I think you'll be able to get the best out of that player. So not to be involved in training camp, not to be around the rink, it sure is different this year.
Wait a sec. What is Sidney Crosby's deficiencies?
That's a great question. not many, I'll tell you. Like, and I've been fortunate for 7 years to work with Sid, and I don't think you can get a better human being. A player that, the one thing I have to say, like, he's probably not the most skilled player, but because of his work ethic, because of his dedication, and just that eager or that urge to improve on a daily basis, he's made himself like the best player of this era. And and it's unusual. Like he has some specifics as far as his love for the game that are not found in many players today. Like I think he's the type of player that just loves to come into your office after a practice and spend an hour talking about hockey, or even just at night. Sometime I'll just be watching a game, pre-scouting a game, and I'll be getting a text. Did you see what they did on the power play? I think you think we could put that into our power play. So he's always constant love for the game and improvement of the game, and just such a great human being to be around.
The one thing about him, I always have told people, and I kind of got spoiled watching enough of their playoff games, is he's the best practice player I've ever seen in my life. The way he would go about practice, did you notice that about him, or am I making this up? Like, he's the one guy I could just notice in practice that stood out completely.
No, you're not wrong at all. And I think that it's such a pleasure, and it's such an important factor for a coach to have a player like that, because he sets the tone for the practice, and he's a player that looks for perfection in practice and doesn't accept nothing else. And what the time that he spends, even like before practice or after practice, working on the details. But you're absolutely right. He's a type of player that, and it's great to have as a coach, because he's a great sounding board as far as your length of practice, that you have the material that you cover. It's great to get his input, because I think it helps the team to get better on a daily basis.
Where would you put Alfie, Daniel Alfredsson, in terms of that kind of preparation practice type player?
Well, that's the one thing about Daniel. I think he was a player that practiced hard, had great dedication, and also a player that spent a lot of time after practice working on some of the details to improve his game. Just his attitude. I think his leadership, I think is very similar to Sid. from a standpoint that a lot of those leaders, they lead by example. It's not that they're big talkers in the dressing room. It's just how they go about their job on a daily basis, how they prepare for a practice, the concentration, the focus that they bring to the practice, the attention to detail. And the same thing with the game, with the preparation. They're looking for information to make themselves better, to better prepare themselves. So I think Alfie is very close to, is very similar to Sid on that standpoint.
When you look back at your 9 years in Ottawa, I guess, how would you sum it up? You dominated, you had so many successful years. I know you fell short in the playoffs, but really you took a team that was, I'm going to say, in a mess or disarray, or at least on the rebuild, and turned them into a perennial Stanley Cup contender.
Well, I think I was very fortunate to have some great talent in Ottawa, and I think a lot of the credit should go to the organization, the scouting staff, the support staff, and everybody. I think when I came to Ottawa, I still remember my first meeting with the players. Looking at around the room at the players on a morning of a game, and just looking at the eyes, and all what they were looking for was directions, really, somebody to lead them. And as I said, I think I was very fortunate to have some great talent. When you look at, a lot of times when you look at building teams, you look at building through the center, but really our strength, you look at the right side. When we had Alfie, we had Asa, we had Avlat. That's pretty good, three pretty good right wingers. And then we had some great players. You look at defense, the Wade Redden, the Chris Phillips, the Zeno Shera, just to name a few. I think when I think of Ottawa, I think I'm very proud of what I've accomplished. I'm disappointed that we didn't win a Stanley Cup, and I really learned a lot. And I think that I know that at this point in my career, or even like later on in my career, I think I really improved as a coach. When I look at Ottawa, probably my biggest disappointments are playoff. Our failures against the Maple Leaf. If I would have had the experience that I have now, I think I could have helped our team a lot more in the playoff, and hopefully would have brought a cup to Ottawa. I think that's the one area. But I have tremendous memories of my years in Ottawa. The growth of our players, like whether it's I remember every training camp. I think at the end of camp, before we started season, we'd always go on a retreat, and I always try to bring the team to a different place. I remember maybe the first year might have been Lake Placid because we were opening the season in Montreal, whether it was Mont Tremblant, whether it was Vail, or whether it was Banff, or La Malbaie in Quebec, Charlevoix. Those were great experience. And I think it was my third year. I remember we were in Banff because we were opening the season out west. And when we were doing that team building, trying to get the players involved, in establishing the guidelines for the season, or the values for the season, and what the players came up with was the word "pay the price," and every letter stood for a statement, whether it's preparation, whether it's attention to details, attitude, whatever it was. But just to see the growth of the players through those meetings, and what they had come up with, to me as a coach, that made me feel really good to see that they were really growing, not just only as hockey players, but really as people. And I was very fortunate to have some great people in Ottawa. So I think there's lots of memories. Like I said, the disappointment was not to win a Stanley Cup for the organization and the city of Ottawa.
And Jacques, just to add to that, with regards to the Ottawa Senators, obviously some great teams there during those years. When you came in, you've always had that great reputation of being very defensively structured, and you liked your team playing with structure, of course. I never had the pleasure of playing with you. I would have loved that. But so I'm assuming there's a bit of truth there, of course, judging by your reaction. Did you ever have trouble reining in some of these high-powered players, offensively minded guys, and getting them to buy into that transition into your style of play?
Not really. I think because I really believe, as you're correct in saying that, I believe in defense. I believe in having structure, because I think you need to have that to win a cup. And I think that's the ultimate goal. But at the same time, I think I've always been a coach that preached liberty of players, let the players express themselves, the skilled players. I think to me that the guideline is don't put your teammates in trouble. Or even like, a great example, for instance, I would show sometime players, making turnovers at the blue line. But if you stop and come back and help out, that's okay. I don't have any issues with that. So I think it's more of a being able to read situation. But I've always preached, creativity in the players. And it's interesting because when I came to Ottawa, I looked at basically at two teams to me that were that influenced me in developing the system of play that we wanted to play. I thought that the two of the better teams in the league at that time were the Detroit Red Wings and the New Jersey Devils, and probably more creativity with the Red Wings, a little more structure with the Devils, and try to combine both those elements. And it's interesting when people say I'm a defensive coach. I sure was a defensive coach when I first started in Ottawa because we didn't have the talent to score goals. But my last four or 5 years in Ottawa, we were one of the highest scoring teams. So, but I think, I try to get players to play both ends of the ice, and I think, in most cases now, it's what you see, and it reminds me a little bit of my experience with the 2002 Olympic team. I remember when we had our first meeting, we had the notes from the 1998 Team Canada. That played at the Olympics, and they were built up with like 6 forwards of star players and then more of a role player. And I remember when we had the big discussion with Wayne Gretzky, who was our general manager. Well, why do we need the role players at the Olympics? I mean, you look at the end of a game, who are you going to have on the ice? Steve Yzerman's going to be on the ice. Joe Sakic's going to be on the ice because they're 200 feet players. So, and then if you have some injuries, those guys could move up the lineup. So I think it's recognizing your personnel and trying to make the best, but develop a system and develop a strategy that's going to try to bring the most of each player.
That's funny you say that, Jacques. I was going to interrupt Meth just before you answered to say, listen, he's taken this all his career of being this defensive coach. I think in the total time you were in Ottawa, all 9 years, you were 6th overall in most goals scored or 5th, somewhere in that area. And I always remember because people be like, it's just boring hockey. I'm like, wait a second. They're scoring 5 goals a game. It's not that like tell Daniel Alfredson it's not very exciting when he's got 94 points, right? So I do want to say we watched how it wasn't defensive. You just got labeled that way. And you could never shake it for the rest of your career, right?
No, I guess that's true. But, and that's fine. I think, and as a coach, it's like a player. You grow. Like I mean, like when I left Ottawa, then I had some great opportunities. I went to Florida for 5 years. I was coach and GM there. Then I came to Montreal, and then probably I learned a lot when I was in Pittsburgh as an assistant. Not only from a coaching standpoint, but also more from a manager standpoint. I think it was an organization. I give a lot of credit to Jim Rutherford that. He did a great job managing people and, hired people, let them work. But, I look at the game, not only on the ice, but off the ice. There's been so many changes. It's changed unbelievable. When I first started in '86, basically the general manager who was my first GM was Ron Caron. I think people in Ottawa would remember the professor. The coach and his right-hand man would run the team. Now, the general manager, I mean, he's got 12, 15 people that he relies on, his coaching staff, his assistant GM, his pro scout. And probably the other aspect of the game that's changed tremendously, either as a coach and as a GM, you've got to really learn to manage up. And I think it's so important now. I feel that the general manager is almost part of the coaching staff in today's game, because the general manager's got to answer to either his president or the ownership. And in most cases now, ownership is very, very involved in the game. So they've got to be part of the solution. So I think that's why you have people, in order to be successful, everybody's got to be on the same page.
if there was one player in Ottawa that created the most controversy surrounding you, was Jason Spezza, and how his career began. Would you now, knowing what you know, changed anything as you handled it back then?
No, not really, because I think people felt that, there's two players that probably people felt that I didn't handle well. Maybe Jason's a good example, and would be PK Subban in Montreal. But I have tremendous respect for Jason, and I did then. I think it's a matter of progressing, and it's a matter of learning. And I think I've always respected how hard Jason worked off the ice in the summertime, his diet, and how he was committed. And I think it's proven. Like when you look at the length of his career, he's still playing. And I've had some good conversation a couple of years ago when I was in Pittsburgh with Jason on a morning of a game. At that time, it's difficult because I know when I took him out of the lineup in Toronto in the playoff game, but before I made that decision, I spoke with our leaders. I had consulted with Alfie. As a coach, you're trying to put the best players that's going to allow you to win the game. And at that time, Jason had some excellent offensive skill, but had some deficiency. And I think he learned over the years. I think the year after, I think I left Ottawa was a year of a lockout. So Jason went and played in Binghamton. A lot of the guys that were eligible went and played it, and it really helped their development. And I think Jason has developed into a tremendous two-way players. But not just Jason, a lot of players when they start, that they don't understand how they have to evolve and get better at some other aspect. And it's in this day and age, maybe I would have handled it differently. But I think it's helped him with his career, and PK the same thing. I think in PK's situation in Montreal, I don't know how many meetings I had before I had to take him out, but he would still do the same thing. The one thing I've got to say, once I took him out for a couple of games, he was our best defenseman the second half of the season. And unfortunately, as a coach, that's the leverage you have, their ice time. I mean, they all have guaranteed contracts. So the game has changed. You've got to try to hope that doesn't go to that situation. But sometime, it's funny. I'll tell you an example. You bring a great point here. I had a good conversation with Julien Brisebois this summer. And we were talking about, what was the turning point for their organization before they won their first Stanley Cup. And we both agreed, it was the same situation. First of all, it was accumulation of defeats in the playoff, losing in the final, Stanley Cup final, losing in the conference final to us. And then 3 years ago, after having an outstanding regular season, losing in the first round 4 straight to Columbus. That was a big impact. But probably the second most important point was the following season, halfway through the season, John Cooper decided to bench Kucherov for an entire third period. And at that point, I think he made a statement to his team that you have to play a certain way to win in the playoff. So that was it wasn't taking him out, but Kucherov wasn't a beginning player either. So I think you don't like to do those things, but when you look at the game, and I don't know, I'd like to know Mark's opinion, but my own opinion with top players, the difficulty for them in the playoff is that because the game changes in the playoff, the referees, there's very little call, there's very little space. So you have to adjust your game, and I think a lot of the top players have difficulty adjusting their game in the playoff. And I think that's one factor. The quicker they adjust, and I think when you look at Tampa the last 2 years, you look at the way Kucherov last year and Stamkos, the way they played, I mean, it was unbelievable. They were a big factor, but even in the final, which probably the third line was the most factor or the most impressive line for Tampa, still the Kucherov and the Stamkos didn't put their team in bad situation. They dumped pucks in when they had to. They still were creative, but for them to adjust, sometimes it's hard for star players to understand that. And to me, in order to win a Stanley Cup, your star players have to play a certain way, team committed. And the other thing is you need to have the depth. If you don't have the depth, you look at all the teams that win the Stanley Cup during those 4 rounds, because it's a marathon. Your star players are going to be the top guys, but you're going to have some games and some series where your foot soldier are going to carry you, are going to allow you to win games. And I know the 2 Stanley Cups that we won in Pitt, our star players were good, but we wouldn't have won if it wouldn't have been for our third line and fourth line, like the Nick Bonino, the Matt Cullen, those people that brought great contribution to our team.
Yeah, and you bring that up, Jacques, with regards to that 2017 run you guys had, and obviously,
Okay, wait a sec, Matt. I appreciate the fact that he just rolled over that he didn't mention that he put it into your season. That, you know, Chris Kunitz, he didn't mention Chris Kunitz's name, nothing. Like, he did that very sly. I appreciate that.
Well, we're going to get to that right now. So no, but I'm curious, because we come into that building, I guess it's sort of off topic in a sense, but we come in there, or rather meet up with you guys in that 3rd round. And we obviously have a different style where, you know, as you remember, Guy Boucher liked that 1-3-1. It was a bit of a different system that you're playing against. Obviously, and I love the point that you make about having your your top players buy in, because you're right, that the playoffs is different. They're just completely different. Like, I was able to take liberties on a ton of players and get away with it, right? And I'm a good example of that, and I'll own it. That's fair. So
could I ask you a question, Mark, before?
Yeah,
no, I think you bring a great point, you know, like Guy's system is different. But really, you guys that had a great playoff run that year, to me, it wasn't about the system. Like, we had no trouble through your neutral zone. The difference was all the players were committed. Like, I remember the number of shots that you guys blocked. And, you know, and I think that, you know, like every team has their own system, so they play within it. But if guys aren't committed, you're not going to win. And you guys were committed and played really well. And I think that, you know, in order to, like, players today, as a coach, to me, you've got to consider, when you decide on your system, most teams now play a pressure game because players like that. I think, you know, like, you want to pressure. Like, that was one thing in our zone, we weren't getting pressured, you know, so we spent a lot of time in your zone. But you guys did a tremendous job blocking shots, you know, cutting lanes, and, you know, you were really committed. So I think that's the point I wanted to emphasize, that in the playoff, it's amazing how guys are, you know, block shots and do things that they don't do in the regular season. Sorry to interrupt.
No. That's you're bang on. So that was, I guess, leading me into my question was, I'm assuming I've already heard the answer just now, in that I guess there really wasn't an adjustment that you guys had to make. It was just hoping that your offense would eventually come and you guys had to be patient. I'm assuming that's it.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, we were the more talented team, and, you know, but it just shows that even if you have more talent, it doesn't mean you're going to win, you know, and especially if the other team plays the right way. And I think both teams could have won. Like, I mean, in the 7th game, it went to a second overtime period. And, you know, it just shows that, you know, you need the breaks. And, you know, really that year, like, it's interesting because our first 2 rounds, the goaltender, especially against Washington, Marc-Andre Fleury was outstanding. He was a big factor in us beating Washington that year. And what's interesting is Washington probably had a better hockey team that year than the following year when they won the Stanley Cup, you know, talent-wise. Yeah, you know, and then against you guys, it was a tremendous series. You know, the way you guys played, you're committed, you had some good offense, and, you know, we were fortunate to win. And then also, like, you know, when Fleury had a bad game, I think in Ottawa, that game 3, got replaced by Murray. Then Murray came in and he played outstanding.
Yeah. So what was the game like? I mean, you've coached a million rounds here. If you can remember, did you guys have any specific game plans, like with regards to our team, that you had to apply?
Yeah, definitely. Like, you know, like, especially when you look at, you know, special teams, like, I think, you know, you had some big shooters. You know, you talk about the key players on your team. But a lot of times, and probably like when I was saying before, a lot of times when you get into playoff, as a coach, what allows you to win is the players winning their one-on-one battles, a lot of times.
Yep.
But, what I've learned over the years in my coaching days is that players don't like to hear that. So you kind of have to massage it, or players are looking for answers when you after a loss. So a lot of times you got to refer to your system. You got to, bring some adjustment. Okay. So you got to get them involved, not so much talking about the one-on-one battles because they don't, but in reality, if you win your one-on-one battles, if you outnumber opposition on the puck, what makes the difference. But I think against you guys, I think, yes, we had a certain way to play against your neutral zone because it was different than a lot of other teams. But I think, again, it's a matter of reading the play from a standpoint, and we had a lot of skilled players. But when you don't have ice or you don't have time, you got to use the ice that's available. And against you guys with that system is really just getting the puck behind and not too hard, because with the 1-3-1, you've got one guy back. But if you got a nice little chip with support, you could regain puck possession, And a lot of times you look at the game now in the playoff, most goals are scored by shots that are screened, rebounds. You'll get the pretty goal once in a while, but most often it's the ugly goals that wins games.
Speaking of Matt Murray, you said came in that series, ended up going on to win the Stanley Cup. Can he regain his form in Ottawa? I'm sure you've seen the struggles he's had of late, and now signed to a big deal here. I know it's tough to talk about players on other teams, but do you think that he can find that game again?
Yes, for sure. I think Matt is an excellent goaltender. I mean, there's a reason why he's won 2 cups, and I think that he's a goalie that probably he needs some protection. I think I'll give you some good example. I think was the 2 years after we won the cup. We weren't very good defensively. We weren't a committed team in regular season. I think we were 28th in the league as far as odd man rush against. So it's difficult for a goalie if you don't help him, if you don't have good coverage. So I think that the team in Ottawa this year, I think a little more experience. I think they'll probably play better defensively, and I think that's going to help Matt. But I believe that he's a number one goaltender, and I believe that he'll bounce back.
I got a million questions, and I'm trying not to bounce all over the place, but I need to ask this before I forget. You had Gary Roberts when you were the general manager of the Florida Panthers, and the Ottawa Senators wanted to acquire him. Were you ever going to trade Gary Roberts to the Ottawa Senators?
Yeah, I think
there's a pause there, Jacques.
No. I'm just trying to recollect that when the case came up, I was in Florida. Yeah, no, I think I don't have any issues with trading Gary back. I mean, Gary was very good for my career. I actually had Gary in junior hockey in Guelph when we won the Memorial Cup. He was one of the major reason we won the cup. So, and then it was great to get back having Gary in Florida, as well as Joe Newendike. I think they were two, tremendous veterans to help the kids develop. So, no, I have no issues. I think it just turned out to be that, we had a little more coming back.
What happened?
What do you mean what happened? We traded him to Pittsburgh.
But how close was the deal with Ottawa? It seemed like it was done, and then all of a sudden he ended up in Pittsburgh.
No, I don't think, the deal wasn't done in Ottawa. No, okay. I think, that's just speculation by the media.
Well, this is classic Brent Wallace, Jacques. So you have to understand who you're speaking to right now. He's just digging for shit.
I'm thinking I probably had 1,000 interviews with Jacques.
He's still the same as before.
He's still the same.
But I've never had this kind of time, so I just want to make sure I make the most of it. The other one was Pete DeBoer, you hired as head coach in Florida, and he was in the running for Ottawa. Was it ever close that he was going to end up in Ottawa, not there? I was told it's a 4-year deal. He wanted a 4-year deal in Ottawa and didn't get it, so he ended up in Florida. Is there anything there with hiring Pete DeBoer as your coach?
No, I think I knew that he had met with Ottawa. Actually, I think he met with even the ownership in Ottawa. No, I think when I identified Peter as the guy that I wanted, I think he felt comfortable with our environment, and for whatever reason, you'd have to ask Peter why he picked Florida. But I think it was a good place. I have a lot of respect for Pete, what he did before entering the NHL. I think he was a young, promising coach that had a lot of success in the OHL, and I felt that would have a really good career in the NHL, and he has. So I think I was very fortunate that we're able to get him. It's funny you bring that up. Like Pete DeBoer, but the one thing I was able to do through my career, like I've hired a lot of people, like I don't know if you guys know about like fitness, but Andy O'Brien, who trains Sidney Crosby, he came to fly. I hired him when I was in Florida. So, so I think, I think Peter was made the right decision.
Like, I think he just picked the favorite GM. And did you like being GM? Like, it seemed like you were always a coach. Like I always thought of you as a coach, and I saw you as GM, and I'm curious if did that feel right to you? Was it fun to make the moves?
Well, it was fun, but it was kind of a peculiar situation. If you remember, I was GM coach for 2 years. I became GM after 1 year of coaching in Florida, and then I did both jobs for 2, and then just stepped up to GM, and I enjoyed the GM job. But I when I look back, when I was talking before about managing down, managing up, I didn't do a good job of managing my ownership, and after my experience now, if I was to do it again, I would change that. But I enjoyed, working with my scouts, working my assistant GM. I think you guys remember I hired Randy Sexton as my assistant GM, and enjoy that. I didn't enjoy having to go through my budget every month, line by line, to try to save money. I guess if you guys will remember, that's the year that the market went down in 2009.
Yeah,
2009.
2009.
Yeah, 2008. Yeah. When the market went down, just as a side note here, getting a call from my ownership one time. We're in LA, so I got a call at 5:00 in the morning asking me to cut my budget by 10 million. So, just so some of the fun things of being a general manager. But no, I enjoyed working as a general manager, and I was really kind of green, but learned through the process. And then I had an opportunity, I think, when Montreal contacted Florida to get back into coaching, and having an opportunity to coach a great organization with so much history. It was a challenge that I had to take.
Okay, I don't know whether to go to Montreal or go back to Ottawa. I'm going to go back to Ottawa because you talked about budgets and whatnot, and you went through bankruptcies, and it seemed like there was always a story that you had to deal with. I can always remember you being asked if you got paid and whether or not there was any money in your bank account that day. How did you manage a team as successful as you did with all this stuff that's going on, with Rod Brydon doing a press conference after a press conference of trying to raise money that didn't show up?
Well, I don't know if you'll remember, but the one thing when I was in Ottawa, I talked a lot about the process.
Yeah.
But the player,
we still talk about that today. Yeah.
But with the players, probably the message that I brought on a daily basis was, you got to learn to worry about the things that are within your control. Don't worry about things that you can't control. And ownership, you can't control. It doesn't affect us. So basically, I think, sure, it's a lot of publicity and there's a lot of things, but the bottom line, we're paid to do a job. We're paid to play, and let's play to the best of our ability. So, and I think that, it's a philosophy I had. Why should I worry about things that I have no control? It's the same thing people think, like you worry about getting fired. I never worried about getting fired because I felt that I work hard, I do my job, and when they're not happy, when they feel that they don't want me, they'll just tell me. Why should I worry about something I have no control over? And I think because of that approach, it takes some pressure off you. You know, you don't consider that as as pressure.
You're always so stoic and in control. Do you ever let loose? Does Jacques Martin let his hair down?
Oh yeah, I let loose, but I guess the approach I have is I really feel, and I think that's the one thing that people probably don't know about me. I think I was very hard on players at time, and when I go back at some of the things that I've done with players in meetings, I mean, I wouldn't do that again. I mean, but I've always kept it inside. I've never talked to the media about it, and I've always felt too that I've never attacked a player like on a personal note. I think it's, I've always tried to be very respectful. There might be a couple of incidents in Montreal where, I can maybe gone overboard, but it wasn't intention. Like it just kind of happened. But I think I've always felt that I always wanted to respect my players because I feel that, I feel privileged that I had an opportunity to coach them. And I was just, trying to make them better. So, whether it was through video or, sometimes through meetings or so on. But I think my intentions were good. I know on the bench or in press conference, I know I'm not very emotional, but that's who you are.
This might be the first time I've ever heard you laugh.
I was going to say he's doing something right if he's managed to stick around for 35 years. And it's the same thing with, I had Rick Bowness finally in Dallas. I was injured most of the time, but another great example of a coach I'm going in to meet, and I know that he's been around forever, and I finally get to meet him, and he's just such a personable guy that has known his role with every team that he's ever coached. And I think that's part of why he's had so much longevity, a lot like yourself, Jacques, where you just know how to manage every person individually. And sometimes Bones would get emotional, but he always knew to rein himself back in eventually at some point. So I can appreciate where you're coming from. And I think there's something to be said, being able to be in the league for that long, that's an eternity.
Yeah. Well, like Brent, I think a great example, I got to tell you, you remember Martin Avlat.
Yeah.
I think, it wasn't always rosy with Marty, Marty was a very skillful player, but he was very stubborn, if I want to say. And, he was very cocky when he first started. So, a lot of time, I had to I was really hard on Marty Avlat. But, remember 3 years ago when you guys had the outdoor games against the Canadiens?
Yeah.
I think the alumni played the day before
down
on
Parliament
Hill. So I think it was the day before he was traveling. I get a call. It was about noon in my office. I'm sitting in my office. I get a call, Marty Avlat. And just to thank me, he said, I know we weren't always on the same wavelength. We had some tough discussion, but just thank me for how I handled him. And he felt that it really helped his career. So
Awesome.
those are things that, sometimes makes you feel good as a coach. And, it's like raising your children. Like sometimes, sometimes you got to be hard, and you do it because it's going to be the best for them.
Two things. If you could talk to Marty and we've tried to get him on the show. So just let me know if you send him a message and tell him to come on. The other thing is Marty led to the biggest brawl in NHL history, I'll call it, is the Philadelphia game in March 2004. We've had Ken Hitchcock on the show earlier. He discussed his side of things. What did you remember about that night in Philadelphia?
Well, I don't know. Was it Marty that started? I thought it was Rob Ray.
No, Marty was the one the game before where Ken Hitchcock said he's going to eat his lunch someday because I think he caused the kicking incident and he caused some other incident.
Okay. But then when in Philly and near the end of the game, I think it was Rob that kind of got the thing going. And, it's interesting. I admire our players. I think the courage they had and how they stick together. I mean, we weren't a physical team, but we were a close team. We believed and, we helped each other out. And it's funny that you mentioned that because after that game, I didn't know. I found out after. I guess Bobby Clark came down by our dressing room, I guess, wanted to see me. So I guess he wasn't too happy with it.
Our good friend Steve Keogh stopped him in the hallway and he said, "I want your coach." Yeah. So that's one of the best parts. The other part is, do you remember the post-game scrum? I wasn't there, but Michael Whalen is in the scrum with, I think it's Tim Panaccio, and they start pushing each other in front of you. And someone told me that it almost looked like they were going to go to blows, and you're just kind of watching this all unfold.
I don't remember that. It's too many incidents. I'm losing some memories. Yeah.
The other one is the Battle of Ontario. Always seemed to have something happened back in the day, and I guess the classic is Travis Green and Darcy Tucker nearly in your bench or in it at one point. Did you enjoy those games as much as it seemed the players did? When I can see you and Pat Quinn yelling at each other occasionally.
Yeah, I did enjoy those games, and like I said, I would hope that would have had the experience that I've got now when we played those games. But it was great, and it's funny, as much as we yell at each other with Pat Quinn. I had the opportunity to work with him at the Olympics, and we developed a great relationship and great respect for each other. So it was a battle. I mean, like, they were a team that were built like more for the playoff. Like, you look at the Gary Roberts, the Shane Corson, the Tucker, and all those guys. We were more skilled, and part of it sometimes is just to be patient and be able to get through it. And I remember I think it might have been the last time we lost to them. Eddie Belfour was outstanding. So it's a little bit like Tampa. They were knocked down about four times before they were able to win the cup. And so I think we learned from those experiences. But in the end, like the last year, I got fired. Marian Hossa got traded, and I didn't understand that one. I think Hossa was such a premier player, so sometimes you overreact to those situations.
Did you know that you were going to be fired at the end of that, losing to the Leafs in 2004?
No, I didn't know, because I didn't worry about that. And thanks to John Muckler at the time, he wasted no time. I think it might have been the day after or 2 days after that, he let me know. So I appreciate that. And hey, I appreciate, I was very fortunate. I was in Ottawa for 8.5 years. We had some great years, and it was a great experience, and I'm very appreciative. And like in all the place that I've coached, I think it's probably the place that meant the most to me. I mean, it's my hometown, so I have some great memories there, and I think hope that the team brings the Stanley Cup to the city. And having had the chance to win 2 cup in Pittsburgh, I could tell how hard it is to win a cup, because it took me a lot of years to be able to win one. But the satisfaction of winning it is just an unbelievable feeling.
Do you see this team in Ottawa kind of like the team that you started and built in Ottawa back in the day, and that they're starting to make that turn and heading towards being a contender?
Yeah, I think so. I think that they're a team that has got great talent, great young guys. It seems that they got some good leadership with some of their young players. And as I said, I think they just got to keep growing. Maybe probably at some point in time, they probably got to inject some veterans when they get maybe closer. But I think definitely that's a team that eventually could win a cup.
You don't have to answer this, but I'm going to ask it. One of the things that ended up you being released in New York was Tom Wilson incident. And if you look back at it now, is it still something that bothers you guys that you went through on that side of things, where if you're in Washington, you have no issues with the Tom Wilson incident? I'm just curious of what your thoughts are.
Yeah, well, New York situation is, like a little different when you look like, the president, the general managers, the whole coaching staff, a whole bunch of people that got let go. So I think, whether it was the Tom Wilson incident or not, it's unfortunate what happens, but I think with the Tom Wilson, you need to have the guns to answer that one. Otherwise, you just try to stand up for each other. So, it's hard to say. Like, I mean, you don't control that. You love to have a Tom Wilson on your team, but if you don't, then you have to have take a different approach.
Mm-hmm. It was certainly an interesting time. What's next for Jacques Martin?
Well, I think probably this year I'm going to do a little bit of TVA, do some game analysis with them. Then kind of step back. I think, like I mentioned to you, I had the one knee surgery now. Probably going to have the next one mid-January. So this year is really to try to, get my body back working 100%, and hopefully get back. I think I'd like to go back and work with an organization, maybe as an advisory role. I feel that I have a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience that I could help, whether it's on the coaching side, management side. I think that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking to work full time again. I think I've earned some time to relax and enjoy life and smile. And but I'd like to join an organization again, because I think it's great to be part of an organization and have an opportunity to contribute and give some advice and play that role.
Do you talk to Ken Hitchcock a lot? I mean, he's done that for the last couple of years, or I guess the last 2 years now of being the advisor.
Yeah, I've talked to Ken at times, and I know he was with the Oilers. That's what he was doing. Now he's moved on with the Blues. So it's something that I think through this year I'll pursue, like with some conversation with some different general managers that I know and feel that there would be a fit there. So. But I think this year I basically want to concentrate on getting my body back.
I have two last questions. One is, who's your favorite player, or best player, I should say, that you've ever coached in Ottawa? Because I'm going to guess your favorite player might be Alfie, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. But who's the best player you've ever coached?
Well, I think it's hard to say best one player. Like, I think, when you have Alfie, you got Marian Asa. I think those two players are just an elite level, and they've shown all through their career, not only as players but also as people. I think that they're outstanding. Mike Fisher was a tremendous person, I think that and a tremendous player. So that I think those players. There's a lot of things we talked about sitting Jason Spezza. I remember sitting Randy Cunningworth, who was my captain. I don't know if you remember that in the series against New Jersey. So, and how he handled it, and how he was professional, and what a super captain. It was tremendous. So it just shows that the type of person he was, the type of, and thinking of the team first. And so I was fortunate. I had a lot of great people in Ottawa.
Which player frustrated you more, Alexei Yashin or Radek Bonk?
I don't think I like Radek Bonk. I mean, probably when you're saying frustrating would have been maybe Vlaslav Prospal, and Vinny Prospal. But I loved him. I loved him as a player, and I was really, when we traded him, I was really disappointed, because I felt that he was a great player. Like, he had so much respect for the game, and he worked at his game. And, and again, he was stubborn, but I love him. And then we traded him, and Alexei, you got to understand Alexei. Alexei was an artist. He was a great player. You can't, I think during regular season, he was a player that you love. He was a player that didn't understand and had trouble adjusting to a playoff series. And when we played Toronto, I mean, they'd be in his face, and, he never overcame that. He didn't, we made that trade, and that trade was great. It gave us Spezza and Shera. But I think, those, like I said earlier in our conversation, you need to understand and recognize what the assets or the strengths of a players are, and other aspects you need to try to improve. And you get to a point with your management, that certain players aren't the type of players that are going to help you win in the playoffs. So then you got to move them.
That reminds me of Alexei. The year he was the Hart finalist, he had 94 points. You guys go into Buffalo and get swept. And I can remember I think you're coming back for game 3 or 4. I can't remember which way it is, but you said he's got to find a way to get through that. And he never did. Mike Pekka just shadowed him the entire time and couldn't get through it.
Yeah, and I feel bad that I wasn't able to help them to get through that. I think as a coach, that's part of your responsibility, and I assume that responsibility. But I think, he's not the only player. Like, I think I've seen that over my career. Like, certain players are great in the playoff, and then great during regular season, but are not playoff performer.
Last question. We ask this to everybody. If you're sitting around watching a movie or a hockey game, in your case, you're probably watching tape. What's your favorite snack?
Try to get away from snacks. Diet Pepsi.
There you go.
There's no food. There's no chocolate. There's no chips.
There's chips, and there's all that junk food. Cheese, probably my biggest. If you want to really, I should give you an honest answer. My weakest is cheese.
I was going to say
Saint Albert cheese.
You're an Eastern Ontario guy. Saint Albert is the best. So I'm the same
exactly.
way. That's good.
Yeah.
Good man.
Didn't your daughter work there at one point, or still does?
She did. Yeah. My youngest daughter. Yeah, she did. She no longer works there anymore. She gave birth to triplets, so she had to give up her job. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So are you babysitting?
Unfortunately, I've been working all the time, so I don't get a chance to babysit. But
I'm now 3.5 now, so it'll be close.
There you go.
Wow. Anyway, I appreciate this because I've never had the chance to sit down and have this conversation with you, and you were always so good to me for 9 years in Ottawa. So, Jacques, thank you for stopping by. We wish you all the best and hope to see you on a bench or at least around a rink sometime soon.
I appreciate it, guys. It was great. And I just want to say, Brent, this is my first time that I do this show, do a show like that. So It's new for me. And just to show, like, you got to adjust with the times.
Well, thank you.
I
appreciate it.
Take care, sir.
Appreciate it very much.
Okay.
Take care.
See you, Coach.
Bye-bye.
All right, welcome back to the Wally and Methot Show. Joining us now, Craig, as always. And Craig, it's an interesting interview when you get a chance to talk to Jacques, because I've never had a chance to sit down for an hour with him. Obviously, I think I've interviewed him over 1,000 times, basically, over the course of his career. But he's quietly a very funny individual. He just prefers that to be off camera and remain that stoic figure on camera.
Yeah, that was really cool. Because I mean, listen, I wasn't there when he was there, and Meth was kind of the same, right? Like that was kind of my first time to see him do it. He even admitted it. That was his first time really doing an interview like that. So it's pretty cool to see. Like, I'm guilty of it because I don't have to talk, but I just kind of sat there and listened through that one. So, Meth, what about you? I mean, you didn't have tons of experience with this guy. What was your thought on the Jacques Martin interview and getting to talk with him?
Like I say this every time we interview a coach, particularly someone with so much NHL experience. I'm almost kind of intimidated. It's crazy. And you guys both mentioned it, where you have a stoic figure, NHL coach that, even from my vantage point when I played and you'd see him on the bench, never a screamer or anything, always had this very intriguing look on his face where he was very focused. And so, like I said, you almost kind of go into a shell until I start hearing him open up, and I'm thinking, man, he's got a great personality. Like he's well-spoken, he's interesting. He had great stories. So it was very refreshing. But being from Ottawa, like you, Craig, or like you mentioned, like being from Ottawa, growing up watching him, I found it so neat to be able to interview him, and it was not what I expected. I had the expectation that he would be very short in his answers and very, very serious, and it was the complete opposite. And then he won me over at the end when he mentioned cheese curds from Saint Albert, East Ontario. Right away, you could do like my eyes lit up, and I was super excited. But no, it was a fun interview, and I was very pleasantly surprised. And it's funny, like how much better is this for a lot of people out there in the hockey community that you don't really know a lot about? When they come on and do these shows, it almost just adds a level of respect towards them. It makes them more likable, right? Like,
you're more human.
Now that I've interviewed him, I view him in a much different light than I did prior. And it just only does these people favors, I find, at least.
It's funny. So one of the things, him opening up, talking about he wished he would have done things differently in Ottawa to help win a Stanley Cup. And I really appreciate just the honesty and the rawness of that. Because when we would interview Jacques, it would always be, you got next to nothing. So it would be, and we still say no doubt to this day, and everybody knows exactly who we're referring to when we use that term. I can remember a couple of times, it's one of the Battles of Ontario. Lance Brown from CTV Toronto was in town. I'm pretty sure Curtis Joseph's in that. And Curtis got run, I think, in one of the, Paddy Lalim got run in one of the games. And so now there's all this talk about running the goaltender.
Yep.
And so we're in one of the Coliseum rooms. So it's full of media. It's probably like 50 people at the time, because back then there was all kinds of media. And so Lance is at the back of the room. And he's a very confrontational guy when he asks questions. And Jacques is very stoic. So it goes like this. Jacques, do you plan to run the goalie? And Jacques like, you don't control that. And so he goes, you didn't answer my question. Are you planning on running the goaltender? And he's like, no, I think I answered your question. He's like, Jacques, that is not the answer. And so now it's really, so all of a sudden Phil Legault now, who's the PR guy, steps in and goes, he's already answered your question. He goes, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to Jacques. And we're like, oh my Lord, what is, so Jacques, but Jacques nothing ever changes. He's the same guy. He's like, we're moving on to the next one. Then the last one I can always remember with Jacques was, it was one of the bankruptcies. It's the bankruptcy, but it's one of the times when the players aren't getting paid. And we can't get really any answers. Of course, who's going to say, oh, no, I didn't get my paycheck today. So Ken Avrera, who was at the new RO or A channel at the time, is in the little media room, and Jacques and Ken's been known to ask some out of there questions. Jacques, did you get paid today? And Jacques, whenever there was anything controversial, he would just deflect. I don't control that. Well, Jacques, when you went to your bank account, was there more money in it or not? He's like, you don't control that. And then Phil Legault stepped in again. He's like, we're done here. We're not answering any more of these questions. So that was Jacques, who never really wanted to answer the question, but always had some kind of energy. Like, it was still entertaining regardless if he said nothing. Anyway, that was my Jacques Martin stuff.
This is off topic. We'll bring it back to Jacques in a second here. Brent, what was it like covering the team back pre-social media days? Like, if somebody did something like that, how do you even tell people?
Oh, that's great. Because we only had a set Sports Center time. So you either did Sports Center at 6 or Sports Center late. So if you if you didn't get it onto those shows, you didn't get it. So sometimes you'd get called later at night and have to do a phoner, or you'd have to go to a rink or something and shoot a stand up and do it on camera. But that's it. Like, if you don't beat the paper out the night before, then the paper's got it the next day, and then you're chasing it later in the day. That's all it was.
That sounds exhausting.
But those days, like, they were, because for us, I didn't leave the rink. I got there at 9 a.m. and didn't leave until post game afterwards because of technical, like, we would have to feed from the rink. And so we'd have to send our stuff in the middle of the afternoon. You'd have to book a satellite window. Now you just do it whenever and send it all. It's so much easier. But back in the day, I would go to Marshy's and just sit at Marshy's for an hour or two. And at one point I was rolling the napkins with the utensils for them. Other times I helped change rink board ads, and I'd pick up pucks after practice. Like, you just couldn't go anywhere. So I actually enjoyed that time, because back in that day, it was much more relaxed. You weren't worried about
it wasn't a race.
Phones. And so you didn't want to get beat, but you only had certain times to get it. So,
but you each had your own platform, right? Like, you could go, you'd go over the broadcast, the writing guys would write for the paper or whatever. Whereas now everybody's just competing. I was just curious about that when you mentioned kind of the old media things, because I always hear stories about fights and people pushing for spots and things. But now in today's day, like, you'd see video of that probably, right? And so maybe guys are letting
for sure. Louis Jean in Montreal, and
that's the one I've always heard about.
Rob Martier was at, I think, CJAD in Montreal. I'm pretty sure that's the radio station. Anyway, I'm in the locker room that day. I'm pretty sure I'm working for Global in Montreal that time. Anyway, all of a sudden, over off to the left, because I'm talking to Mark Recchi, by the way, and I'm doing my own camera work. And so I'm asking a question, and I peek my head out from behind the camera to get him to answer it. And he's like, this is so bizarre, Brent. So anyway, we're having a chat. All of a sudden, Saku Koivu is now standing on the locker stalls because Rob Martier has Louis Jean by the tie, and he's basically trying to strangle him. And so everybody in the room just stops, and all the players are there like, oh, what's going to happen? It got out of hand, obviously. And nowadays you would have that video everywhere, but back in the day, there is no video. But like, there are times when it gets a little feisty, especially back in the day when there's so much more media and the crush of media. you just get really people that get annoying. And so you want to move them out of the way.
Meth, did you ever have that? Do you ever have guys shoving or pushing or whatever at one of your scrums? Were the Mark Methot scrums big enough to? Sometimes it's just like those Hamburglar ones got a little feisty sometimes because there was like 30 people at them. But
no, it was more just they would kind of infringe on maybe your stallmate, like the next guy over.
I always felt bad about that.
Yeah,
okay.
It's all.
You know what's different now though is because back in that time, you basically had one shot to get these answers. Now you can kind of go back to players. Like I would actually stop and I'd wait for Mark Borowiecki to be done talking or someone else, and I'd come in afterwards and ask my question. But back in the day, you had to either get it or it was gone, and so the jostling for 7, 8, 9 cameras and then the writers and then the reporters. It did get a bit hectic, especially in playoffs where tensions are higher, and you can feel it if you're covering a Montreal or a Toronto series with Ottawa, because the media started to really take it personal, and so they would be like, "Well, this is my team, and I need to be in here," and I'm like, "Okay, I guess do what you got to do." So eventually, we would bring in 2 cameras. We'd bring in Mark Masters or whoever to cover the Leafs, and we do the Sens because that way you get a little bit, you'd be in each scrum. You wouldn't have to chase back and forth. But in the old days, you have to run back and forth to each locker room.
I love talking about that stuff just because I got to see some of the newer stuff. So I love hearing the stories. Just to circle it back to Jacques here, Matt, I had something for you. You were, before we started it, you were really psyched to ask him about the 2017 playoffs. Were you disappointed that he just knew that they were the better team and that that was his answer? Is like, we were just better than you guys. We just had to wait for you guys to stop playing so hard.
I was a little disappointed with the answer because he didn't really elaborate. I wanted to know, I'm like, what was your effing game plan? Just effing tell me. But it was like, well, and it kind of like just deflected off that a little bit where I wanted more detail. But I'm not going to yell at a Hall of Fame coach for not answering my question properly. So I just kept my mouth shut. But it's fun. Like, it's fantastic. I'm a huge fan of his. But I wanted to know, right? And he still didn't really answer the question. But it's all
his answer was just, we were better than you. We were the better team. We were more skilled. You guys,
we were. We had to be patient and all that. I'm like, no,
no.
X's
what did you
and
do?
O's. Give me an X's and O's. Like, were there certain players you were focused on? Where you but I didn't want to insult him, so I just let it slide.
No, I thought that was funny. Just largely because before you're like, I'm gonna ask him about this, and we're all like, ask him about 2017, and he's just like, we were better. It's like, fuck.
I had like maybe 3 questions, and that was the big one, and it was a total flop.
Anyways, that one made me laugh at the fly. He kind of answered it, but just it wasn't really what I think you were hoping for. But
it was a fluffy answer.
Yeah. Anyways, boys, there's some congrats to go around. I saw a photo floating around social media yesterday. Some good work from our golf tournament. You guys want to elaborate on that? That was good stuff. I love seeing
that. We got very fortunate. So I remember when Meth and I started talking, right when I started talking about and Craig doing this podcast, we were thinking like, what can we do as a charity? I would like to give back. And then I think it was Meth or I just spewed out, let's do a golf tournament. If I know now, if I knew then what I know now, no chance would I have done a golf tournament. Well, it's like, I shouldn't say that. It's exhausting. And I didn't know what I didn't know, but it was extremely well run by Faces, and they did a really good job of putting it all together. And the fact I've never been able to write a check for $10,000 to give to somebody. It felt really good just to be able to donate this money to a mental health and for obviously youth mental health. And this doesn't happen without this show and how it's come together. And so all of us deserve a little pat on the back. And I, so I helped maybe start the golf tournament, but it doesn't happen without you two. So that's
but that was a lot of legwork by you there. I know you on our end, right? Like Meth and I, we had a bunch of other shows. Like that was kind of your thing. I mean, we helped support you when you needed it, obviously, but that was definitely your thing. So man, you should take a good lion's share of that credit.
Great job, Wally, and a big shout out to Justin McKinnon from Faces. He, I mean, not only did he help spearhead the event with Wally, but I mean, even at the auction, I feel like he bought most of the stuff. So no, he was instrumental there as well. So we want to thank him and Faces Magazine for sure.
Yeah, and Evan at Faces, because she's going to be mad.
And Evan, of course.
Didn't say thank you to her. So anyway, let's try and do that again next year. It was a fantastic event. We got very lucky with the weather and all the COVID stuff that allowed us to have a full course, a complement of golfers. So
it was great.
We've started to talk about doing it again next year, so it'll be even better.
Nice. Awesome. Well, something we do every week is we do a little trivia. So we're gonna pop into that because we wrap things up today. Gong Show. We're going back to our Gong Show friends. They're hooking us up with a Wally and Methot hoodie. They're great. I should have worn mine today. They're great. Super comfy. Logo on the front. Rep the brand. Come on, boys, help us out. We're gonna give one away today. If you kind of listened to our Jacques Martin interview, you heard that he was maybe fired a long time ago. So our question goes back to that. How many head coaches have the Ottawa Senators had since Jacques Martin? So if you know the answer to that one, head on over to Twitter, use the hashtag Wally and Methot. Be sure to tag @GongShowGear on Twitter. Send us your answer. And if you get it right, you put into a little draw and we're going to pull a name. And that person we're going to reach out to via DMs to figure out how to get you one of these very sweet Wally Methot Gong Show hoodies.
They are comfy. I will give you that.
Pretty good. Yeah, man.
All right, coming up Monday, we're going to do a live show. It's Thanksgiving Monday, so everybody should be home, sitting around, probably tired with their tryptophan in their system. So, Matt, do you know what tryptophan is?
Yeah, but it's all bullshit.
Why did I do this?
It's been completely debunked, and it's just overeating on Thanksgiving. That's what that is.
All right, I should have known. So anyway, we're going to take questions from you guys. We're going to have a ask away kind of day. So we're going to prepare some stuff, but yeah, we want to get the fan engagement. So we're going to talk on Monday.
Yeah, can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun. Have a good weekend, boys?
Enjoy your Thanksgiving, everybody.
Enjoy. Yeah, all right. Have fun.